Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. We're just going to wait for everyone to flow through from the waiting room and we'll start the webinar shortly. Okay, so this is the next in the series of the iMove Project Outcomes webinars, this time with a project up in Queensland. And I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of lands from all around Australia, from which we're meeting today for this webinar, and pay respects to elders past and present. Excited to present this research to you, particularly because I know that it's already generated a bit of interest in other jurisdictions. And I think there may be some of our colleagues from Transport for New South Wales on here today as well, who will know a little bit about that. I would like to just do a little bit of housekeeping. So firstly, in terms of questions, if you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, that will be great. And you can put questions through at any time. Just pop them in the Q&A and we'll get to those at the end. We've got a little bit of time left. And then the chat has been switched off just to make sure that everything goes through the Q&A. So it will be recorded and this will be available on the iMove website in due course, usually within a day or two. So anyone that misses it or is unable to stay for the whole webinar, it will be available to you on the website shortly. Likewise, the final report will be available for people to get more information about the outcomes. So without further ado, the people that you have really come to listen to, I'll introduce them now and we can go through the presentation. I'd like to introduce Louise Dutton, who's the Manager, Project Planning and Corridor Management and Far North Queensland Transport and Main Roads. And Professor Ione Lewis from the Centre for Accident Research and Road Safety at QUT, and Dr. Mao Shan, who is Research Fellow at Australian Centre for Robotics Research, even at the University of Sydney. So thanks for joining us today, guys. Looking forward to hearing from you. And Louise, I'd like to hand over to you now just to start the presentation, and I'll jump in with the Q&A at the end. So over to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Good afternoon, everyone. I too would like to acknowledge traditional owners. I myself was sitting on the lands of the Gamoy Yidinji up here in Cairns. So I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Thanks for joining us today. Myself, Mal and Ione have partnered together with our respective organisations to do a really interesting research project that we've fondly called the LLAMA project, which stands for the Large Animal Activated Roadside Monitoring and Alert System. So I challenge you to say that 5 times fast. There's a reason we called it LLAMA. I'll jump straight into it, guys. The basis of our presentation today, we're going to take you through the project objectives, our scope, the research methodology, our field trial and what we learned, the outcomes, as well as what's next. And you can probably tell from the last couple of slides that the, target animal, the large animal that we were really focusing in on for our project was the cassowary. It's an iconic endangered species up here in Far North Queensland. It's very dear to a lot of the community's hearts, and TMR, so that's Transport of Main Roads, is very, conscious and, very focused on what we can do to play our part in terms of the conservation of this species, as well as considering the road safety implications for these large animals on the road. So the problem, what was our project all about? So a lot of people, when they think about the LLAMA project and they hear about we're dealing with cassowaries on the road, they focus in on the conservation outcome and the conservation focus of that, which is very important. Another part of that problem is the road safety element of that. And you can see here in a video that was taken from one of our traffic cameras, this is the Kennedy Highway up on Nicaranda, part of the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area. And you can see an animal there on the right-hand side with chicks. And as it approaches the road, it's put off a number of times, and then it just decides to make a run for it. And what you can see there is a semi-trailer crossing double barrier lines to avoid hitting this animal. Now, there's no reason for that semi-trailer to avoid hitting that animal other than its reaction. And they obviously, as a human, don't want to hit and injure a bird, but it's not going to cause damage to that vehicle. But it's also doing that evasive action created a very unsafe situation. If there'd been a vehicle on the other side, it would have been quite a nasty outcome. So it's not just about, I guess, the road safety in terms of the vehicle hitting the animal and what damage that could cause to both the animal and the vehicle, but it's about that driver reaction. So that's the situation. We've got an animal on the side of the road that suddenly appears. We know that the drivers will just, I guess, through their natural reaction, make evasive actions, and this creates that dangerous maneuver. And that's the situation that we're trying to look at and go, okay, what can we do about that? We don't want to fence the road and prevent these animals from crossing. It's critical for their long-term sustainability as a species that they cross and they can use different habitat. So we need to deal with this as an operational, I guess, risk and hazard to our roads and come up with a solution. So the llama's objectives looking at that problem were about detection and then providing that information to the drivers. We had actually done a previous study. It's a proof of concept trial that we did with CSIRO using AI to detect the animals. So we have already done that first part of the research to work out, could we, using AI technology, detect and identify the large animal that was the target species, the cassowary, using, I guess, a sensor on the side of the road. So, yep, we knew we could do that. The next part of that challenge is, okay, once we've detected it and identified it, how do we present that information? How do we give that message to drivers in that moment, right there on site, to warn them about the cassowary or the hazard on the road? We identified that we could do that through what we call variable message signs. So that's those signs on the side of the road where the road operator can say, right, hazard ahead or slow down. We can put messages there and we can define what those messages are. So it's not just an automated stop go, it's actually a controlled message. So we knew we could do that as well. What we didn't know going into the llama trial was, what do drivers do with that information? Will it actually, providing that message to them, make the situation safer? Will they hit the brakes and slam on the brakes and stop in the middle of the road? Does that make the situation less safe even? So we really needed to understand what influence that would have on the drivers, and could it be part of the solution in terms of making it safer? The project that we defined, so we worked with our partners through iMove to define a scope that included, let's do a market scan. Let's go and do research. Surely we're not the only ones out there with this similar problem. What other projects have been working in this space? What other technologies are available? What's their level of success and implementation? So we did that market scan and literature review. We then wanted to develop our own detection system based on what we'd already learned, but as well as looking at a broader perspective. So the initial proof of concept trial was purely focused at cassowaries. As the name suggests, with the llama, the large animal activated roadside monitoring and alert system, we wanted to define a system that might be able to be used in future for other animal species, be it koalas that are nocturnal or other large animals that have created other similar unsafe situations like horses on the Bruce Highway. So we wanted to have a system that could be, I guess, a broadly implemented approach. We had to define the message. So again, this project is a road safety project. It was looking at what is the message that's really going to get that, I guess, meaning through to the drivers about, there's a hazard on the road in front of you now, you need to do something. So we needed that, I guess, immediacy of the message to get through. We also wanted to utilize a driving simulator. So we wanted to be able to have, in a controlled environment, an understanding of what those drivers are going to do, before we went out and did it in the field. So thankfully, the Cars Q team came on board and they just happened to have a driving simulator that we could use, which was fantastic. And then finally, the last step of the trial was a field trial to deploy the system out on a real road, open road, and work out again through monitoring the driver's response to the message. What happens? Does the situation actually improve in terms of road safety? I'm going to hand over to Ione from the Cars Q team, who can explain to you the methodology of messaging design. And let me tell you, it's a lot more complicated than it seems. I was blown away by how involved this process is. So Ione, over to you.
Thanks, Louise. Thank you. So yes, look, I think where to start. I think looking at the VMS there are actually a couple of the examples that went through simulator and went to final on-road trial as well. So a bit of a spoiler alert, the top images there was an example of what we used. So as Louise said, I think it's really important that I think it's always quite deceptive in many respects to look at these signs on messages and just think, throw something together. There is a lot more behind this, especially if you're wanting to ensure that they're eliciting the outcomes or the behaviour changes that you're looking for. So in this case, we did follow a very well-established structured approach to how we went about initially designing. So very first stages, looking at the literature, looking what's out there around the globe. Perhaps not surprisingly, there wasn't really anything that was looking or talking about casserie. So we were really trailblazing there when we were looking at images of and wanting to identify casseries as being the particular animal involved in it, that we were wanting to raise awareness of. So we looked at the literature. We also went to what I know about messaging development and content and what we should be really mindful of. So we started with essentially I put together 20 different concepts and we piloted those through focus groups. So we had 8 focus groups and a total of 36 people partook in those different groups. And we really mixed up different combinations. So we had text only messages, we had picture only or pictogram based ones, and we had combinations. So similar to what you see there, that would be a combination message of the casserie detected with the image. We also tested a range of the actual image of a casserie. Were people identifying that's a casserie? Did they actually understand that was what it was referring to? Most of the messages that we did or that were tested were 2 screen options. So the screen would obviously flick between these two components as drivers approached, and a casserie had indeed been detected. So I think that what you can see from there, that we had combinations of different, I had so many different, whether the word detected or casserie about or casserie ahead, there were all these different combinations, and we really honed in closely with our participants about the meaning of those different words, because as Louise alluded to, this wasn't just to be a generalized informational message, this was to be a real-time alert. We wanted people to look at this and go, oh wow, okay, this is right now and this is needing me to do something right now because it's happening in real time. So that was critical, that the wording really reflected that. So we did spend a lot of time playing with different combinations of words in our testing to ensure that was what people were saying to us and they got that message. I think also part of that was the way that it was designed, in that the message would only display when a casserie was detected. So in this case, the screen would be blank. There would be nothing if there was no detection of a casserie. So to see this message flash up as somebody approached it, that, you know, really was to further emphasize this is happening now. So that, through concept testing, we ultimately identified 4 messages, all 2 screened options like what you're seeing on the screen now, that we wanted to take through into the simulator trial. And ultimately, we did get that down to 2 messages that we took to the on-road trial. So the message that we can see there, as I said, that is one of them. The other, we actually took the image out and the first screen simply said casserie detected. Talking about the second screen for a moment, the slow down, look out, again, it looks deceptively simple, but we tried various combinations of the action words that we were wanting to cue to action about what we wanted people to do. The key things here were, of course, wanting people to reduce their speed and to scan or monitor the road environment. They were the two behaviours that we kept focusing on and testing and self-report. Is this what you would do if you saw that? So even the order of those two action phrases was really important. So we had look out, slow down, and it came back, no, you need me to slow down first. That's the most critical thing. If I take my speed off, then I'm scanning. So that combination, there were different upper and low title case, exclamation marks. Ultimately, it came down to being very simple, direct, removing things like and, exclamation marks, keeping it simple and direct and really clear, which is what this is, and certainly what we went ahead with this message. We did also go through and evaluate this in a large online survey. So we had 557 motorists who, I think our criteria, over 18 years and over, and currently licensed, and who drove a week or more, an hour a week or more as our criteria. And we tested it with them as well. And the messages were really, we were keen to establish not only that people would say they intended to slow down and to scan the road environment, but we wanted to also make sure, again, as Louise alluded to, that people weren't telling us, oh, I'm seeing this message, I would stop suddenly. That would be my immediate reaction, is to stop suddenly, pull up in the road, or deviate or swerve to the side of the road. We had to really explore that as being an option, and any messages that had any indication that the propensity of someone to report, I would pull up immediately, on the road, that was one we didn't want to go forward with. We really needed people to be aware that it was about slowing down and scanning, but being very conscious of being safe as they were doing what they were doing. Okay, so I think jumping to the next slide, just in terms of, this is a very a full framework, a very detailed slide. This is for anyone who's interested. This is the framework that underpinned what was done in terms of developing the content. And particularly, I spent a lot of time with regards to the focus groups I was talking about were all consistent with step 3 of this framework, which is the step approach to message design and testing. And this was really going back to motorists and really just working through and testing and getting all of this feedback about the different messaging options. Step 4 was what we did in the survey, with really evaluating those different outcomes. Are people slowing down? Are people saying they're scanning the road environment? Similarly, when we took it to the simulator trial, were we seeing people slowing down? Were we able to see that they were actually monitoring the road environment and looking where they should, if the casserie was on the side of the road or if it was crossing the road in the scenario? So I think that this is really what helped us to spend some time here to understand the messages that were going to be the most had the greatest chance of being effective and to achieve what we were wanting the messages to achieve. So at that point, I might now pass over to Matt.
Thanks, Louise, and thanks, Ione, for the introduction and covering the message design part. Louise mentioned earlier about the 2021 proof of concept detection system. In this project, ACFR team developed the detection system from scratch. We installed 3 different types of sensors. They are thermal camera, RGB cameras, and LiDAR. Do we actually need all 3 sensor types for animal detection? Probably not. But these sensors, they have their own pros and cons. So one of the research questions we want to find answers to is which sensor modality or which combination is most effective in detecting large animals. So under this particular field trial context, we are talking about detecting categories crossing the road. And our conclusion of the field trial is that RGB cameras are the most cost-effective choice. But I want to stress that the best choice is likely different if we are detecting a different animal species. So you can find the comparison details in the final report. The system was first developed and tested in our ACFR lab at Sydney Uni and then deployed remotely in far North Queensland. Throughout the entire field trial period, we accessed the system remotely from Sydney through 4G cellular connection for data collection and model updates. Of course, the field trial wouldn't be possible without the strong help from the TMR team, as in installing and maintaining the system for us. The detection system is powered by solar panels and batteries of the VMS. This makes the entire system portable. It could be towed and deployed easily at different locations without the need for grid access. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, let's talk about the animal detection algorithm. Now, how it works. This is the most exciting part of the detection system. As you can see, the heart of the detection system is a machine learning model running on the edge computer. There are a few boxes this model needs to tick. First of all, it's a model that is trained to detect particular animal species, like cassowaries in this project. It's doing one job, and it should do it really well. Second, the model needs to be lightweight such that it can run really fast enough, and can detect animals in real time. So the last box this model needs to tick is a very challenging one. It needs to have the self-training capability. You probably know that machine learning models are very data hungry. To perform well, they often require a significant amount of data for training. However, it's very difficult to find large animal-related datasets, not to mention datasets for Australian-specific animals in Australian environments. Traditionally, the solution is to collect a lot of data containing the particular animal species from the field, and then manually label the data for model training. This works, but it requires very expensive labor cost for human annotation, and it becomes eventually not sustainable and not scalable to label data for every single animal species that we want to detect. Even if we do it, the models probably need new data for retraining once the environment condition changes. So this is why it was essential for us to enable self-training capability for animal detection. And we proposed a novel self-learning pipeline in this project. For self-training, we are talking about letting the AI models teach themselves to detect cassowaries without humans' help. How did we achieve that? We leverage large foundation models as a teacher to teach the lightweight edge model as a student. The teacher model is running on the cloud, and the student model is deployed on the edge computer within the detection system. So what is a foundation model? The most popular one, probably you know, is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is quite powerful, but it's primarily a large language model. So in this project, we instead used a different foundation model called the vision language model, which associates the vision and the language together. The whole pipeline, as you can see, works like a cycle, and I will explain the details in the next slide, please. So in this, as I mentioned before, in this project, the cloud model is a vision language model, which has been pre-trained on a massive web scale dataset of over 1 billion image text pairs. And we provide text prompts to describe the animals we want to detect. For cassowaries, the prompt is something like a big, black, flightless bird. And given the prompt, the vision language model can find objects in images that match the description and draw bounding boxes around them. Therefore, we are actually leveraging vision language model to automate the data labeling process and replace human labeling. To kick off the self-training, we first need web-sourced data to train the first edge model. It doesn't matter if this model doesn't perform well. Then we need the edge model to collect field data and send a small portion to the cloud for the vision language model to label. The label data is then used to retrain and improve the edge model. The edge model then continues to collect more field data for labeling and training. And iteratively, the edge model is getting better and better at detecting the animals in the deployment environment. Next slide, please. For the field trial, we conducted a 5-month-long field trial to collect the field data and evaluate the performance of the detection system. So this deployment site was selected considering a few factors. For instance, it needs to be an active animal crossing area, and we would like the detection system to stay close to the crossing area for sensors to work well, and the area has minimal vision occlusion and so on. So as importantly, we also wanted to evaluate if the designed warning message results in safer driver response. When the detection system is operating, it keeps monitoring the potential crossing area. Once it detects a cassowary on the road or roadside, it triggers a warning message for motorists. In the field trial, TMR also installed 4 sets of pneumatic tubes on the road to monitor the vehicle speed change at the different locations. So Louise, I think she will talk about the field trial outcome in later slides. Next slide, please. Here I present one example showing how the detection works from the sensor perspective. The left window, the white one, shows the LiDAR data, which we in the end decided not to use for animal detection. The 4 visual images, on the right-hand side correspond to 3 RGB camera feeds and 1 thermal camera feed. These RGB camera feeds, they cover short, mid, and long ranges. And there were 4 instances of edge model running simultaneously on the edge computer. And the warning message is triggered if any of the camera feeds detects cassowaries. The source code of the project has been made available publicly, and the QR code for the GitHub link is available in the final report. Next slide, please. The field deployment of a system usually comes with many challenges. In the field trial, we had some challenges that were technical, and some were more related to logistic and system maintenance. So as a vision-based detection system, one of the major challenges is the sensor occlusion caused by, as you can see on the picture on the left-hand side, by road signs, vegetation, terrain, and other road use like cars. It's important to pick a deployment location with minimal occlusion. Another challenge is the influence of rainy and foggy weather on detection range. Sensor fusion in this case could be a promising direction to improve the system robustness against this. In addition, the mounting of the sensor head to the VMS trailer wasn't quite rigid. So the sensor angle actually slowly shifted over time, and TMR had to occasionally visit the site and correct the sensor angle for us. Solving these challenges, really helped us gain more insights and more experience for field deployment, and it's also beneficial to further improve the system design. I'm now handing over, the presentation back to Luis. Luis, if you'd like to, you may talk about some challenges from TMR's perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mal. I like how you've made the challenges seem really minor in retrospect, but I can guarantee you throughout the trial, nothing is more certain than research is not linear. We certainly had our fair share of challenges. So the not least of which was the weather. So the timing of this trial was, I guess, basically January to May, really, after tropical or ex-tropical cyclone Jasper hit the region, which was, I guess, the most severe weather I've certainly ever seen here in far north, and it's just decimated the wet tropics. It didn't just rain before Christmas, it rained for the next 5 to 6 months. And with rain comes cloudy conditions. And with this, I guess, field site being at Kuranda, we had, I guess, much reduced solar energy being supplied to the VMS. So that was a huge challenge. We thought we'd have plenty, wasn't the case. We had to come up with another way to source more solar power. So we then had basically a light tower, a solid powered light tower that we then deployed next to the VMS and connected it without turning the lights on, and basically used that as an extra solar panel to try and charge the batteries. Even then, we were barely getting enough to get the batteries to last 24 hours. So thankfully for our trial, cassowaries tend to move in the mornings and the afternoon. So, unfortunately at peak hours as far as traffic's concerned, but thankfully for our trial, at the right times that the solar, panels had enough time to get some juice to switch the machine back on. So that was fortunate, but certainly a big learning. If you were doing a trial with nocturnal animals, you would definitely need to think that through in terms of how you're going to maintain the power throughout the night. In terms of, and I'm sure we'll be asked this question, the batteries and security of the batteries and the solar power. I was shocked and somewhat hugely relieved that throughout this trial, we did not have any vandalism or theft of either the solar panels or the batteries. Unfortunately, that was expected. We were expecting them to be disappeared pretty quickly. I think somewhat fortunately, there was a rumor amongst the community that this was a police camera. That may have helped in protecting them from being vandalized. So I'm not going to, dissuade anyone from believing that. So that was good. Certainly, the IT and sort of the ITS support and the maintenance crews from RoadTech, their support was absolutely required. So certainly, if you're doing this kind of field trial, it's absolutely necessary that it's a partnership. We had a partnership with our research partners. We also had a partnership with our road stewards, that they were part of this project and we absolutely needed them. They were charging up batteries. They were trying to change connections to save power. It was all hands-on, so I can't thank them enough. Also, that last dot point, the confirmation of the message displayed. So that's somewhat connected with that weather influence and the challenges that we had with the batteries and the machine. The machine, and Mal's probably chewing the inside of his mouth because I'm using the term machine, but the sensors would detect the cassowary. So there'd be enough juice that the sensor would be on and the computer would be functioning, detecting the cassowary, but there may not be enough juice in the batteries for the VMS to switch on. So we had instances early on in the trial where we thought there was a message on the screen and that we were detecting, we were monitoring what the drivers would be doing, but in actual fact, the screen wasn't showing. So what was extraordinarily fortunate for our field trial was that this whole site is under the surveillance of a traffic camera. So unconnected with our trial, there is a permanent traffic camera above this site that we worked with our traffic management centre to, I guess, position such that it looked down and surveilled this whole trial location. So we could use that video to detect when the message was on, when the message was off, and we can go through and validate each and every time that the computer said cassowary detected, sign displayed, did it or did it not display, so that we could then either count it in the data for analysis or discount it. So that was extremely fortunate and useful from a trial perspective, but certainly very challenging to get this. It didn't run smoothly, but to get it underway and to keep it moving was certainly all hands on deck. So as I mentioned early on, one of the first sort of steps before we went to field trial was the simulator trial. So this was managed and delivered from the QUT CARS Q team. And it was, I guess the intent of it was to simulate another site that we've been considering for our field trial, because we knew this is a situation and a road environment where cassowaries are crossing. So you'll see on the top of that right-hand image is actually the Tully Mission Beach Road, which is, again, within the wet tropics here in far north Queensland. We've got cassowaries that are reliably and regularly, almost frequently, crossing this road. It was an option for the field trial, but due to access and just that need to be constantly on site, we decided to do it at Kuranda. But we thought we could use this as the simulator trial. The simulator trial had 51 participants. It ran in a loop of 40 minutes. And so it was quite a long, detailed drive, I guess, for the participants. And through that trial, that drive, they were presented with a number of different situations. In some situations, the cassowary could be seen on the side of the road and it didn't cross. In other situations, it was on the side of the road and then it did cross. So we're trying to simulate, strangely enough, a situation in the real world where that driver doesn't know what that animal's going to do, and we're trying to monitor how they react. They then got different messages as they went through that drive in relation to the cassowary, and again, how did they respond in that situation? So the results of the simulator trial identified that the warning signs resulted in speed reduction, which is great, in the approach to the animal, which is exactly what you're expecting to see. So as the vehicle gets that message and is approaching the animal, the vehicle is already slowing down. There was no significant driver behaviour change at the actual animal encounter site, which might sound a little bit counterintuitive and seem like, oh, you'd expect it to be. But if you can, I guess, think through what you would do in that situation is you slow down before you get to that animal. So it's not like you're driving up to the animal and then braking. Again, that's probably typical of what we were expecting to see. Again, it's a good outcome in terms of what we wanted. The warning side did improve the acceleration smoothness. So again, they're braking slowly and not erratically when approaching the animal. And the overall message without an image had a greater impact on driver behaviour, which was very interesting. And we were looking to trial that in that field trial as well. So again, very useful having that simulator trial to have an off-road safe situation where you can trial all these things and understand what that driver is likely to do in the real world scenario. So then we get to the exciting stuff, the field trial. As I said, it was exciting to get the data. It was very challenging to get it, but we got there in the end. We ended up getting 3 months of data collection in relation to the cassowaries, which was fantastic. We had over 250 individual events, and that is individual sightings and detections of the cassowaries. The system was able to correctly detect and identify cassowary in 78.5% of the cases. We were really happy with that. There was some false positives in terms of the system sort of identifying and detecting images that was thinking it was a cassowary when it wasn't. It might have been the vegetation. It could have been some sort of markings on a vehicle, all those sorts of things. And as Mal explained, that's part of that machine learning. So as the trial went, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mal, there was 10 different versions of the model. So each time it got smarter and smarter and smarter around that detection. So the accuracy improved over the course of that 3 months. The really exciting stuff from a road safety perspective is that we got a speed reduction of up to 6.3 kilometres per hour. That may not seem much, but when every kilometre over is killer and your posted speed limit is 60 kilometres an hour, we've got a greater than 10% reduction in speed, which is fantastic. I truly believe that is underrepresented in terms of the reduction, because we have evidence from that traffic camera that was overlooking the site of numerous occasions when the vehicles completely stopped. And they completely stopped because the cassowary was on the road, and everyone had been pre-warned, had slowed down, and was able to stop in a safe manner. But because we were using the tubes, the pneumatic tubes to detect, that doesn't accurately identify when vehicles are stopped per se. So there was a bit of, I guess, toings and froings in terms of how can we analyse that data to be able to, infer when vehicles are stopped, but it was quite challenging. So, like I said, I think that 6.3 kilometres per hour is underrepresenting the results in terms of that speed reduction that we were getting. In terms of that speed reduction, what does that mean from a road safety perspective? If you can reduce someone's speed from 60 down to 53, you're looking at a 31% reduction in the risk of a fatal accident if they're traveling at that speed, which is fantastic. So if they were to come across someone who swerves and takes evasive action onto their side of the road, that's going to reduce the severity of that accident significantly, which is great. Interestingly, I guess the outcomes from the field trial did differ slightly from the simulator, in terms of we found the image on the VMS was really powerful in terms of getting that message across. So that was interesting. Certainly from the detector side of things, as Mal's already said, different detector, different purpose. Certainly the LiDAR, while we were pretty excited about it, it didn't really give us the results we were looking for. I think there's a possibility that if you looked at different sensors and using it in a different way, it might be able to be useful. The thermal camera worked really well. We didn't need it so much because we were dealing with a daytime animal and daytime crossings. If you're dealing with a nocturnal animal, it would definitely be something to look into for sure. And certainly the field trial also identified that really there's a sweet spot in terms of the camera or the sensor accuracy of detecting and identifying the animal. And that was around the 100 to 200 meter mark from the sensor itself. So that's a pretty good range and a good line of sight. But certainly if you're dealing with an animal, perhaps macropods, so you're talking about kangaroos out in Western Queensland, and they're crossing over kilometres of the road, this would be highly challenging, and this maybe isn't the solution that is likely to be useful in that situation. But if you do have that concentrated crossing, again, this is something that could be part of the solution, part of the tools in the toolkit. The field trial was also amazingly informative in relation to just the behaviours of the animals and the cassowaries in particular. So on average, throughout the course of the trial, we detected about 2.5 cases or events of the animal crossing or coming to the road edge per day. But at particular times, there was crossings of up to 15 times a day of the animal on the road. So that's really starting to become those 15 instances of where someone could take an evasive action or there could be, unfortunately a crash. So again, it just really hammered home the need to have road safety initiatives that we can deploy when we have that kind of behaviour near the road. Oh, I didn't on the video. Here we go. Here's a video of the actual trial and what's happening. So it will run again, but basically the sensor detects the cassowary. You can see it there in the zoomed in image. The sign displays our chosen message, and you can see the brakes are on for the cars. So it's a tick, tick, tick in terms of the outcome of what we were hoping to achieve with giving that real-time warning to the drivers of there's a hazard on the road and you need to watch out. Rightio, next steps. So as always with trials, the challenge is what comes next. So Transport and Main Roads is very keen to keep the momentum going with this kind of technology and the trials. We would love to see this progress to a point where it becomes a tool in the toolkit that we can deploy when we get calls that there's a cassowary regularly crossing on the road, or be it that there's a deer that's creating a problem. We can utilize this off the shelf, attach it to one of the VMS trailers and deploy it to site. It could be that it's not a permanent structure that you use it. It might be seasonal depending on the behaviours of the animals, or it could be something that's more permanent. It depends on that situation. It depends on the I guess what's happening there with that animal. What we need to do in order to get to that sort of, I guess, end goal of having it being just an approved tool that we can use is we need to do more testing in terms of differing road conditions. So we've tried it in a situation where there's good line of sight, it's 60 kilometres an hour, and we've only got one lane of traffic in each direction. So there's a whole bunch of different road scenarios that could be used. It could be an urban environment. You might look at multiple lanes in each direction. It could look at different speed environment. What happens in those scenarios? So that's still got to be investigated before, I guess we can truly understand the feasibility and functionality of this tool. Detecting other subject animals. So, and not just animals, it could be pedestrians. So is this a tool that could be deployed around schools with kids in school hours? Smaller animals, nocturnal animals, a whole bunch more that could be investigated there. and utilizing it in a scenario where perhaps line of sight is challenging. So could you coordinate multiple sensors with signs, and how far in advance can that sign be before the driver switches off and goes back up to normal speed? So those are sort of the testings that we need to keep going. Certainly, TMR's chief engineer has got great vision in terms of, I guess, the smart vehicles, the coordinated vehicles that are coming in, making sure that the source code, the program that was developed, is open source. So any car manufacturer can collect that program, input it into their vehicles such that using their sensors already built into the vehicle, they can be looking and detecting animals ahead of the vehicle, and incorporating it into the safety features of that vehicle, which, when you start looking at what's possible there, it's just fantastic. So still a lot more to be done, but certainly we're very excited by the results. I personally would like to thank our research partners, Mao from the Australian Centre of Robotics at the University of Sydney, Dr. Ione and Sebastian from QUT and the CARS Q team there. It's been fantastic. iMove, thank you very much for the opportunity to work on this project. And lastly and not least, I can't forget that my partners with the cassowary recovery team here in Far North Queensland, you guys were able to input into this project through providing all those images that help with our machine learning. So thanks very much to everyone that's had a play in this project. That's it from me. Jackie, I might hand over to you if that's okay, and we can do questions.
Beautiful. Thanks, Louise. I think that was absolutely fantastic, and I can see there's a bit of enthusiasm going on in the Q&A, which is good. Just a couple of questions to kick things off, though. You mentioned about the site, and I was wondering how you identified the site that you chose in order to do the pilot in the first place.
Yeah, look, thank you. It was a known cassowary crossing, basically. So the cassowary has a lot of unique characteristics, one of which is that they are quite, I guess, habitual animals. They will cross at the same location over and over again. And we're not talking multiple cassowaries. We're talking like a single, or maybe there might be two that use that route. But they cross literally within 100, 200 meters sort of section over and over again. So we needed a section where we had reliable, frequent crossings, because nothing would be worse than deploying a sensor and no cassowaries cross. We wanted to have a situation where we had a reasonably high traffic volume, so that, again, more traffic, more data in terms of those crossings. So we also needed line of sight. So there was sort of, I guess, some key characteristics that we used to whittle it down. Like I said, there was another alternative down at the Tully Mission Beach Road. Unfortunately, that just a little bit further from town, that's another hour and a half. So again, looked at how frequently we would need to be out on site, and for convenience, and I guess the reality of the situation, needing it to be close to Cairns was just one of those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you alluded to the fact that it could be used for other animals, or, not even animals, humans as well, for safety purposes, whether permanently or just to deal with a seasonal scenario. A few people are also on board with that idea based on the questions. So could you see this being used? For example, cattle is coming up as a possibility, wombats, koalas. Is this a kind of technology that could be adapted for those particular animals?
Look, yes, but it has to meet those requirements. So in relation to the cattle, I'm certainly aware that we've got wild horses, we've got deer on the road that are causing road safety concerns. It comes down to, is it a concentrated and, I guess, habitual crossing location? If it's just kilometres where it's a problem, far more challenging. Mal, you probably have some commentary that you'd add there.
Yeah, I think overall, I think, the whole idea, the system is, the whole concept is quite transferable for detecting other animal types. But as Louise touched on earlier, if it's a night active animal, like a koalas, hopefully in that case, RGB cameras wouldn't be as useful as detecting cassowaries, but in that case, thermal cameras will become the primary sensor to use. And also, as Luis mentioned about, it's better to be a concentrated crossing area, right? If it is spread out, that means we have to deploy multiple sensor heads to cover a longer stretch. That will be, of course, push up the cost and the maintenance cost.
Yeah, I'll also just add to that was one of the interesting characteristics we saw was the driver behavior. And what we did see was that was so we were monitoring the drivers over about a 300, 400 meter section. If they got a message and they slowed down and maybe the cassowary stayed on the side of the road or, they didn't see it, by the time they got to the fourth loop, they were back up at top speed. So what that's telling us is you've got a very defined window that the driver will respond to that message, after which they're back up to top speed, right? So with that challenge of long kilometres, it's not just the vision in terms of the detectors being able to monitor the site, it's about where that sign is in relation to the animal. Because if the sign is, say, a kilometre away from where the actual animal is, forget it. You won't have enough impact to the driver to last that kilometre. They will have ignored it by that point. So it's not just about the location of the sensors, it's also how, I guess, directly located you can get that message to where the site is.
Yeah. Can I just add there too that it's sort of that's the targeted nature of it. I think that was really what people were finding so appealing and so helpful, was that they realized it was real time. So if it's something that on repeated instances of traveling through there, the message was displayed and they didn't see a cassowary, then obviously that is chipping away at the credibility of, and they're starting to wonder, is this thing actually working? So I think, like Louise said, it's all of those elements coming together to have these things positioned right at the relevant point and for there to be sightings. And obviously that was part of what we were checking, that the system was indeed showing the message when the cassowary was there, and indeed that the driver behaviour was confirming that people were going, this is working and I need to respond to this accordingly. So
yeah, okay. So the immediacy was important to the trial. Yeah. And there's a question that's come through in the Q&A about the board and the message on it, asking whether it was just monochrome or whether there was any colour tested out, or different sort of ways of delivering the information that you might be able to elaborate on.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. And we did test different options with colouring. So we had the blue and the red to make it really stand out that it was a cassowary. That was some of the things we tested. In the focus groups, that people did like that. They were saying that it did really help them to recognise it was a cassowary. Intriguingly, though, at the same time, people were going, but if it's just monochromatic, that's a really simple direct message, and I'm not sort of getting caught up on colouring and things like that. So there was this delicate balance again that we had to always be conscious of, that really needed to be, kept in mind, that simple and direct was really important. I think, speaking to points that Louise and Mayo had about us identifying it was a cassowary and it wasn't some other animal, we did test some generic, animal ahead and things like that. Ultimately, it was the cassowary, reference to cassowary, despite it being a very long word to fit on a VMS. We did find people were saying, look, for me to know where to look and what I should be expecting, I do need to know what animal it is. So that again sort of speaks to that specificity of what are you trying to alert people to, because they were saying exactly that. If it's a small animal low to the ground, that I need to be looking down here, or what am I supposed to be looking out for? So it did ultimately come down to they wanted reference to cassowary and making that really clear, that that's what they were to be scanning the road for.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. This might be one for you, Mal, but just thinking about how the algorithm self-improves over time for detection of the animal. And I think you mentioned, Louise, it was a 78.5% successful detection rate, which is really high and a good result, but that it got better over time. So what was the kind of difference between the start of the trial towards the end of the trial in improvement that you saw?
At first, the very first model was, performing really, really poor because it was just trained on, web sourced data, synthesized data. But the good thing is that's the beauty of self-training, over the next 10 plus iterations of model retraining and update, the performance eventually became good enough that we can, confidently start the on-road trial. And I also want to make a small correction here. We talked about 78 or something. Actually, the number will be, we detect 97% of all the cassowary presence incidents. And but for all the, for the message, for the detection part, we did have some false positives. So that's why out of 100, message alerts, 77% of them are actually related to the cassowaries. So the rest are related to false positive. It can be a pattern at the back of a ute, or it can be some vegetation. It can be something on the road. Those are false positive. But the beauty is, again, through self-training, over time, this kind of false alarm rate should decrease over time and achieve much better. So we actually tune the system to prioritize the recall rate, which means 97%, to such that we're trying not to miss out any actual cassowary sighting cases. So 97% of the actual crossing cases have been picked up.
Yeah, okay, significant. Okay, thanks, Mal. Quick question from Paula from Transport for New South Wales, wondering if there was any kind of community education done around this project, or whether it was based solely on reactions as they came across the sign. Was there any education or awareness raising done?
No, there wasn't, because we wanted to get, I guess, the reaction in real time of the drivers. And we wanted to run with the rumor that it was the police camera so they wouldn't steal our batteries.
I love that. I love the fact that research can now include spreading rumors. So it's
we didn't spread them. We just didn't discount
you
them.
just ran with it. You ran with it. That's okay.
Sorry, Jackie, just to add there. So that was something though. So in our surveys and our focus groups, that was something that we talked about further widespread rollout of this sort of system. That was something that participants were saying to us, that it would be fantastic to have some public education about how this technology works, and what sort of, some of the questions we were getting was time, so like how recently was this cassowary there, what sort of distance are we talking? So like Louise said, again, by the fourth counter of the pneumatic tube, they'd gone back up to full speed if they hadn't spotted anything. So I think that it really, people wanted to understand what sort of distance is this covering? Should I be expecting this to appear? And what sort of time? How recent is this alert? So I think if this was something to be rolled out more broadly, there's no harm in helping people to understand the sorts of key underpinnings of how the system works. Because obviously, as this pilot showed, in the absence of that, people were still getting that, yes, this is real-time messaging. But I think, there certainly was calls for it to help people understand how the technology worked, as a broader public education initiative as well.
Yeah. And I guess for the purposes of this project, having those pure results, as in people's immediate reactions to what's happening without any forewarning, is important, because you need to understand that impact. We did get quite a few questions through in the end. Unfortunately, we're running out of time to answer those, but I can see there's some enthusiasm from our colleagues in WA, Main Roads WA, in how this could work over there for some of the challenges. So I'm happy to put people in touch with the project team. Please reach out to me at iMove. You can reach out to me at jking@iMoveAustralia.com, or just through our inquiries email, and we can connect you up. I believe it's already been of interest to our colleagues at Transport for New South Wales as well. well. So could end up being sort of nationally relevant, which is exciting. But we look forward to Louise. It looks like this is something that has lots of potential for more investigation and rollout down the track from what you were saying with the next step slides. So hopefully we'll see further research done in this area. So in answer to the questions about will the presentation be available, the recorded webinar will be on the iMove website usually within a day or two. So we will send an email to everyone that registered to let them know. But in the meantime, I would like to thank all of our presenters for this really interesting and informative piece of research and presenting it for us all today. So very happy to connect people up. Reach out to me if you need to. But in the meantime, Ione, Mao, and Louise, thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to seeing where this can go next. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.